during presence practice, I've noticed that if I try to take in all the sensory inputs, 99% of the time it gets to be very overwhelming. So I find myself switching back to just focusing on breathing or the high frequency background noise or sound. But that's not. I have this intuition that that is missing something. It helps to. It is helpful in that it helps to prevent the mind from drifting off into various thoughts most of the time pretty effectively, but it seems like it's a pretty heavy hammer to be used against that, but at the same time just trying to be fully present and taking in all the sensory inputs, for lack of a better word. It's very overwhelming. So I'm curious to know if there are any techniques to try out.
Oh, there are lots of techniques, but I think the issue is you're intuiting or feeling the subtle limitations of technique. So when you said that it feels when you're focusing on the breath or focusing on the inner sound, which are two good practices I recommend. You sense that something's missing, is how you said it. I don't think anything's missing, but there's a little bit of a flavor of limitation when you're doing that. A little flavor of intentionality, like a little bit forcing. Now, compared to a lot of other techniques, it's pretty minimal. So you said it's like a heavy hammer, but I mean, there's meditations that are very complicated and very intentional and very limited and very structured that are much heavier hammers. So just the breath awareness is maybe a little hammer, but it's not so heavy.
Maybe I'm exaggerating.
Yeah. And the inner sound, the inner ear, it's limited in a sense. You're just focusing on one thing, and one might feel like you're not fully receiving the richness of the possibility of the moment, which is true because you're limiting it. It's a little like we were talking last week about improvisation in music and having structure and not structure. So if it's very structured, you might feel the limitation of that structure. But if it's very loose, you tend to fall into habit patterns, and you're not really, it's hard to be very open and free. If you're very mature in your practice, either in meditation or in music improvisation in this example, you can be very fresh and new without much structure. But to get there, usually we use structure to help us. The structure helps us keep out of just falling into the habit ruts. So in the same way, a little technique keeps us falling out of the rut of obsessing about some thinking. So it helps us be a little present. But yes, it's still a little limited, and it still has this intentionality on it, like trying to do something, which brings up the self, and brings up the self through time, trying to get a result. It's much more subtle than usually our goal-oriented mind and are trying to get results, which is usually much more gross level, but it's still there subtly. So When you feel distracted and when you feel obsessive thoughts are strong, then it's really good to use the techniques and limit yourself and be relieved of that obsessive pattern. But when you're feeling very present and not so bound, not so pulled into thought patterns, then you can let presence practice become wider and not limited. And you said it's overwhelming. If you were somehow equally focusing on every sense that comes in and every stimulation that comes in, it would be overwhelming. But your mind naturally, when you have a relaxed mind and you're just in presence and you're just letting go, it naturally resonates or focuses on certain things at a time, not everything at the same time. So maybe there's a little more attention goes to the sounds, and then it naturally flows into something in the visual field, and then it naturally flows into something you feel in your body. The breath awareness is there. There can be multiple things you're aware of at the same time, but it's usually not like trying to get everything, you know. Your mind just naturally goes from one thing to another, and there's no force and there's no conscious intentionality about it, and it's just a flowing rhythm of your mind just doing what it does. And so it's not overwhelming. And but there's also no sense of limiting it or structuring it or confining it. It's just open awareness, allowing it to do whatever it does. Even the thoughts that come up is no problem. A thought comes up, but you don't attach to it. You don't give it value, and so it just dissipates. And but sometimes you're more aware of the temperature. Sometimes you're more aware of the inner body. Sometimes you're more aware of sights or sounds. It just naturally flows, but you don't care. Wherever the mind wants to go is okay. So that's the kind of more open-ended, unstructured presence. And in that sense, there's very little feeling of being limited or missing anything. It's just because you're not controlling anything and you're not cutting anything out. You're just totally open. Whatever happens is of equal value and is equally the beauty of just presence mind. So in that sense, we call it emptiness, in the sense if it's empty of any conscious limitation or structure or idea or imposition of thought or analysis or anything. It's just what is, but it's full of whatever is, and you're not in control of it because there's no you anymore, you know? But sometimes sounds come to the fore, sometimes sight come to the fore, sometimes this feeling, sometimes that feeling. And you're not trying to get everything at once. You're not trying to take in more than is natural and comfortable, so it's not overwhelming either. So if you can access that state, then there's nothing else you need to do. And if you can't, if it's usually thinking is dominating, we're not usually dominated by the visual field or the oral field, but if thinking is dominating, then you can use a technique. You can use a technique a whole period of meditation, or you can use it just for a little while until the grasp onto that thinking is released. So, the breath is a good one, even focusing specifically on the lower belly breath coming in and out, the sound in your ears. Also, sometimes you can say phrases. It could be a kind of piece of a chant, or just, I've used many different ones over the years, but whatever happens to resonate with you to bring you into presence. There's nothing that it could be besides this, something like that, or awareness itself is happiness, or as freedom. Just this is everything, or just this is complete, whatever, Some people like questions more, the famous "who am I?" or "what is this?" And some people don't like that because it it's too hard to not engage the intellect. The intellect tries to come up with an answer. If that's the case, you don't want to do that practice. It's not supposed to be an intellect thing. It's an opening thing. You just ask the question and feel open. But if you don't, then statements work also. So that's one practice, using these phrases. You shouldn't do it over and over again for too long, though, because then the intellect inevitably gets involved, and a force sense gets involved, and a trying to get to a certain state gets involved. You don't want that. It should be light and just introducing something to shake yourself up. You know. In the Zen hall, Zen meditation hall, they have the stick that hits people on the shoulder to wake them up. Usually that's for people who look like they're falling asleep, but the sound is great for everyone, to just start fresh. And in the Dzogchen tradition, or in some lineages of it anyway, they have this sound. They just do this yell. Put! Like that. And you're not supposed to do it just when of course, when you're caught in some thinking, you do it. But also if you're caught in some bliss feeling, if you feel like, everything's perfect, you're also supposed to do it, because then you can get attached to that, So not attached to anything. So there's lots of little techniques, and so when you find that a thought habit is strong and holding you, you can do these to help you release. But it's not about trying to maintain through time and trying to get a result, and you don't want to get into that mind. So you just use it and just let go. And if thinking comes back again, it's okay. We're not worried, because deeper than the thinking that comes up is the understanding that none of that is important. And so it can come up and go away. What's important is already what's happening, not what you consciously can do or control, but what actually is. What's underneath, what's watching all the things that appear, not the details of the things that appear. I mean, the details are enjoyable, but grasping them has no value. Accounting for them or measuring them or remembering them have no value. Right? Just their appearance.
So if can't be already.
That wasn't 40 minutes.
If the sensory overload seems, if it is, if it seems overwhelming, could that be indicative of needing some physical activity to? So, could it be that is it because of? I don't know if I have too many thoughts. I know that clearly, there is too much going on in the mind. I need to, but if I get overwhelmed with stimulus, is it also the same? Is it also indicative of the same?
I think so. I mean, I don't know the particulars of what you're experiencing or any other particular person, but when people say they're overwhelmed with, and they seem to indicate it's from sense stimulus, I don't really think it's from sense stimulus. I don't think, I mean, if you're hearing too loud music in a concert, that's getting overwhelmed with too loud volume and it hurts your ears, right? If the light is too bright, it hurts your eyes. So that's physical sense overload. We know what that is. When it's not that, and people just say, oh, it's too much stimulation, I tend to think that it's actually some psychological, some thinking mind problem. There's something your mind is trying to work out or think is more important, and the stimulus is getting in the way, and you don't want that because you think you have something to process, or you're just stressed out by something, and then you blame sense input on increasing your stress when really you're just stressed out. I don't think the senses are generally much of a problem, unless, like I said, it's too loud or something like that.
I mean,
so.
If I can elaborate a little bit, it's usually it's like this. Okay, let's be open to whatever is around, oh, there is that, there is that, there is that, and oh, I can hear this and I can feel this, and it's just one after another, and after a while it gets, okay, let's just focus on the breath.
Right, so the overwhelmingness gets only because you hold each one. So if you say, I got to keep track of this one, and I got to keep track of this one, and I got to keep track of that, then it gets to be too much. And that's kind of what I mean. That's more of an intellectual thing. You're trying to hold in memory all these things, or keep track, or analyze them in some way, or evaluate them in some way, give them some value, or try to get something out of them, or whatever. And there's too many things. You're too busy. Your mind is too busy. But that's not really the sense's fault, right? If you just appreciate whatever happens and then let go of it right after it happens, you're fresh for the new thing. It's just new things can keep coming, but it never gets overwhelming because you're always emptying out. It comes in and empties out immediately, you know? This is the same with thinking. You can do that with thinking. It's a little harder because thinking generally is remembered, but you can remember it less and less, you know? Things come in and you just let it go, you know? Then you're not storing things. When we try to store, that's, you know, it's like using up memory in the computer, like with the camera. So if it wasn't storing, it could just keep going forever. So it's a matter of not trying to keep track. So again, the ego, or the self person through time, thinks that they have to do something with our experience and keep it as a value, like storing money or something, you know, keep it in the bank, and then we're going to use it later. This is important. Of course, for practical things, that's true, right? We learn some information, we have to use it later for some practical thing. But in terms of happiness and enjoying your life, you don't have to store anything and keep it, you know? It's always renewing itself in freshness, and presence is always equally valuable, and it's always awakening happening. So you don't have to keep it from before. You don't have to keep this particular valuable sensation. When you see a beautiful sunset, that's wonderful. Just let it be and let it go. You know, then you can enjoy the beautiful nighttime sky. Then you can enjoy the beautiful firelight, whatever comes next, you know. If you're keeping the sunrise, then you're like, oh, it's gone, I wish I had it, and tomorrow's sunrise, maybe it'll be better. You know, that's the problem, right? So even with that's kind of dramatic over a long period of time, but even subtly, just with a few seconds, we try to hold things, and we try to consider how they're valuable, or how we can use them, or how we get something out of it, how we get some benefit. So all that's the figuring self through time that actually causes suffering, or discontent, or separation from the fullness of presence. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, just recognize, you know, look to see, am I doing that? Why am I holding all these things? You know? Instead, just let them come and let them go. Then I'm always refreshed, ready for the new thing. And again, you're not trying to fill yourself up. You know, let your body mind, the apparent body mind, there isn't really one there, but let your experience settle on whatever it settles on. You know, if it's sound and light together, if it's this particular view, let it be that. You know, you don't have to try to get the 360 view. You know, but if you feel like moving on to a 360 view, then you do that. You know. You never get a 360 view. You're always moving. You always get a piece. The idea of the whole is just an idea that can be oppressive. We keep trying to get more and more. Actually, every particular picture is already complete. Is already full. Whether it seems like a lot of stimulation or it seems like a very little stimulation, it's equally full. It's just a different form. A different shape of fullness, right? Whether you're just in a quiet room with your eyes closed, or in a loud room with lots of lights, it's equally presence happening. It's just a different form, and it's no problem if you're not trying to hold it, or you're not trying to get to something else. If you don't have some other agenda. So if you have an agenda of quietness and you're in a loud room, it's a problem, right? If you have an agenda of loudness, like excitement, and you're in a quiet room and you feel bored, that's a problem. But if you're just with whatever is, there's no problem. The way to do that is to recognize when we put value in something else that isn't, something that isn't right now, and notice that you're doing that and just let go of it. And realize, no, value is in presence, which is whatever it is right now. It's interesting when people talk about, oh, I'm really exhausted from this experience, or I need a rest day, or this is overwhelming, like you said. It like puts it on the outer circumstances, but it's generally not the outer circumstances. I mean, you might physically, your body might need a rest day. That's a little different. But if you're feeling overwhelmed psychologically, it's generally because you're holding on to something, or trying to get to something, or struggling with some stress. So it's not really that there's too much or you need a rest. You just need to clear out, which you can do immediately, but maybe you can't because an obsessive thought is hanging on too strong. So then you do some practice, which might be like doing less activity in a day. So it might be a kind of rest. But you should recognize that there's no problem in the outer circumstance. There's just the phenomena of holding in the mind. This phenomena of trying to get to something else, thinking you have to work something out and get to another place, is so strong in our habits, but it's so easy really to see through it. If we imagine what fulfillment is like, what freedom is like, what deep contentment or deep joy is like, we know in our hearts it's just enjoying life as it's unfolding. The habit pattern is usually that we can't enjoy it yet because conditions aren't right. So eventually we'll get conditions right, and then we'll just be enjoying life. We have to work things out, and then we're just enjoying life. But you can see the problem in there. It's so silly. You'll always be working things out. Conditions always change, and they're always impermanent. But you can start enjoying life now. There's no reason you can't. Whatever you imagine when you get that final perfect conditions, what you do then, you can just do it now. You don't have to wait for those conditions. It has nothing to do with those conditions, you know? It's like you imagine, oh, I've got all the success I want, I've got all the relationship I want, I'm on the beautiful tropical beach, you know, that's the cliche one that people want to be on. But then, what are you going to do? You just have to be present and enjoy the moment. You could do it, this is all practically the same right now. It's all just make-believe, so. We just have to remember that. There's no conditions. Not even figuring this thing out in my mind that I think I can do in a minute. There's not even that. You're already there. Which is not really something you have to do. It's something, it's letting go. Stopping more.
It's actually messing with my mind that, oh, you've been missing out on something.
How much you're missing.
How much else you missed out on.
So the reason we miss so many things is because we're obsessed about some thinking, right? We're not enjoying what is because we're obsessed in thinking. So then, like you say, you have your teacher, your son teacher, helps you to be more fresh and point things out. And then your thinking obsessive mind starts to make ambition about it, starts to make an agenda about it. I got to appreciate a lot of things. And then that's what the oppression is. It's not the actual things you're seeing that's oppressive, right? The variety, even if there's billions of them, it never gets oppressive. It's just one after another you enjoy. But the idea, I've got to enjoy a lot. I have a task now to do, and I haven't been doing it well, and you judge yourself that I've been doing it poorly, and I've got to get to this place in the future where I can see all these things. That's that's the problem. That also is getting in the way of enjoying those things, just like a previous idea did. So I wouldn't, nothing's getting better or worse, it's just that, well, it's probably getting better in some ways, you could say, but it's just changing what kind of thinking is getting in the way. Until you recognize instantly when it comes up, when an agenda mind comes up, an ambition mind comes up, or a judging yourself mind comes up, you just notice it and say, oh, there it is, of no value, let it go, and return to that stick on the ground, to that bird on the tree. You know? And after the bird flies off, it's gone, and you're on to the next thing. But there's no place to get to where you can finally start enjoying everything. You're in that spot now. All you have to do is let go of the thing that's the mental thing that's covering it, that's getting in the way, that's bringing that stress with it, that has an agenda, that has a future, that's in time, basically. If it's in time, if it's about you getting better in the future and improving yourself in the future, let it go. Because everything, nature, the natural awakening of reality or presence is always happening. It's always happening. It's not dependent on you achieving something. Because there's no you, right? The sense of achieving is the you, carries the you with it, right? I should say carries the me with it. That's how it appears to us all, right? It's not just yours. So, you have to watch your son more closely. So when you point out the thing and he sees the thing, he's probably not thinking, I've got to see more things. He's just seeing the thing. Just like that. But if you're not careful, soon he'll adopt that.
Yeah.
I have to start seeing more things so my dad will approve of me. Right? Don't go there. It's inevitable to some degree, perhaps, but try to keep it minimal. So your mind's imagination of what complete life is never complete life, will never be complete life. What's actually already happening is what's complete life, always. And that's the change. That's the transformation. From what I think complete life is, what I'm trying to get to realizing what's happening is already there. And that's why it's such a relief, because you had it. And it's also kind of funny, because you've always had it, and you kept thinking you didn't have it, right? It has to be like this now, exactly like this now, anyway. You may as well enjoy it. It's such a relief to realize it's not a matter of trying to make this better. It's such a burden. We're always trying to make things better. But actually, it has to be just like this. So we're free to enjoy it, which means we don't have to manipulate. We don't have to do anything about it. Practical things we'll keep doing things about. That's a different issue. Right? That's just what the body-mind does. It's just we do things about things. But in terms of our deepest longing, our heart's longing, and our freedom and our deep contentment, there's nothing to do about it. And the practical things, it doesn't matter. We'll do them, but at any point along the line of accomplishing some task, it's of equal value in terms of happiness. It doesn't happen when you get the task done. It's just you happen to be at the task done time and starting a new task. It's irrelevant. But we do get this jolt of freedom sense of relief when we get a task done, because for a second we allow ourselves not to worry about a task, that's all. Well, we could just be that way all the time.